So I'm Tristan. The pronouns I use are they, them, or he, him.
I'm going to tell you my story.
I'm legally blind.
I have about 4 or 5 chronic health conditions.
I've been an epileptic since 8 months of age.
I am diagnosed with autism.
Although I've been diagnosed with affective disorder, which is a feeling disorder, I tend to think a lot.
Well, about 4 years ago, I had brain surgery to work on the epilepsy, and they were going to take a little piece of my brain out. Now, my balance has never been great.
I describe myself generally as autistic rather than a person with autism, certainly not a person afflicted with autism or anything like that.
But they told me that one of the side effects might be problems with balance. Well, needless to say, that showed up.
The Independent Living Center provides me care with daily tasks, normally things that people who are able-bodied can do, like such as getting up in the morning, getting out of bed, dressing.
I've managed to go to school, get 2 degrees, still try to contribute. I serve on a bunch of committees. Just don't have paid work.
Making meals, eating those meals. I need help being fed. I'm also ventilator dependent.
I'm a Master's of Social Work student at Wilfrid Laurier University in my last year.
The Independent Living Center of Waterloo Region takes care of that for me, and they're trained to, and so I can live independently.
I am an employee of a local organization, Extend a Family.
I was a software developer. So 2 key abilities there, the ability to concentrate, the ability to hold things in your short-term memory. Well, those started to be a problem.
Like over the course since I turned 18, 19, I think I've worked 11 months for pay in, 40 odd years. So I won't have much of a pension plan.
They decided that because of the issues with walking and memory and all that, that I was disabled.
I didn't get a diagnosis until I was 25.
I wasn't diagnosed as legally blind till I was 24. So I got through high school barely.
Meanwhile, I'd been doing a full course load the entire time. No wonder I was exhausted.
I have had various health crises on my own in my own life, besides the pandemic going on right now.
Grew up in Nova Scotia. My dad was in the Navy, so he was gone quite a bit till I was 10. And mom was in and out of psych wards. And I had this vision problem that nobody was really helping me with.
When I lived in Northern Ontario as a child, I went in the woods, I fished, I definitely loved nature, going outside, swimming in lakes.
At one point, when I was about 13 or so, I was seeing yet another specialist who told my dad, who told me that I would never amount to more than the janitor.
I find that it makes me a better researcher. It makes me a better teacher.
And yet, I already been labeled a gifted student.
But the story of the 2 mics is important because I'd like people to think about, well, you may be feeling perfect right now. Tomorrow, it could change.
I wrote this poem about 20 years later. And I'll just read it. It's called A Memory. It goes, that awful memory still haunts me. I want to be free to just be. You'll never be anything. In my ear still rings. I know the meaning of being nothing.
Persons with a disability understand being stuck in their homes.
I've known sadness, much loneliness, and emptiness, rarely happiness. Still I go on writing this song like nothing's wrong, but for how long? Is my destiny fixed by a memory, or can I be simply me?
imagine that if a lot of folks, neurotypical folks, have a big work table that they can keep all of their mental projects on, and they've got like a little notepad for phone numbers. I've got like a TV table.
Sort of sums up where I was with all of this. The questions of just, can I get beyond this one thing in my life?
Hasn't affected me a whole lot. The only difference is I'm not really going out as much. I don't have gone out at all, actually. I haven't left the house since March, since the first shutdown.
A lot of the things that people have had to do because of COVID are things that I had to do because things in my life changed drastically. I went from a self-employed programmer to not doing anything.
I can't really put a negative spin on it as much as some people would because of their situation.
I have been able to participate in many meetings via internet, telephone, Zoom,
It's giving me a little more freedom, actually, believe it or not.
that I would not have been able to participate if it was not for the pandemic.
For a lot of people with disabilities, this person can't do anything. And that's just not the case.
I don't feel much at risk, but my family thinks it's so true. So I behave myself, which is hard.
I had forgotten I was smart.
I've always wanted to be involved in advocacy, and the unfortunate thing is that before the COVID, it was more of a negative experience because I couldn't leave the house that easily. You can't just, with a disability, you can't just get up and go.
Do I concentrate on the 94% of normal sight I do not have, or the 5 or 6% that I still have?
Those of us who live with disabilities, with chronic illnesses of all kinds, know well what it's like to deal with that. And everybody else is getting a crash course in being gentle with themselves.
We're not resilient because we have disabilities. We manage our disability because we're resilient. And if I go back to my poem, is my future set by a memory? Well, no. And neither does anybody else's.
Resiliency. It just means that you have to persevere. You have to bounce back. Sometimes things might knock you down, and things have knocked me down in my personal life as well.
That's the same for everybody. We all have to get up in the morning and do what we do to the best of our ability.
I'm pretty resilient that way, and I've been told I was pretty resilient.
Society tries to put us into a box.
I've made really active efforts in the past couple of years to develop a social network, knowing how important that is.
I have been able to access free, healthy food when our budget is tight, that is easy to prepare. Thanks to Food Not Bombs.
So I went to things and I made myself incredibly uncomfortable going to social events where I knew absolutely no one, but I learned to know people and get close to people, and I've got quite a network of people who I now can't visit.
We need to resist that box, push against it, and sometimes break the mold.
I've had a number of falls, and this town, people will stop what they're doing to help me get up. I've even had cars stop and the driver get out, walk over to the sidewalk and help me get up. I think that's awesome.
I was able to access a $2,000 CERB benefit from the federal government for 1 month. And then after 1 month, I was able to return back to my paid employment.
And to me, community is reciprocal interdependence where I have something to offer others and they have something to offer me.
Resiliency is having faith I am valued and have something unique to contribute to the community.
Where we can come when we need something and we can offer when we have something. And we will be missed if we're not there.
And I guess pushing back against circumstances is resilience.
I was born in a time where people with disabilities weren't seen as a positive part of the community, positive members, members of the community that can give back to the community, and we can, in our own way, we can.
Resiliency is finding my unique voice and realizing I am part of a community of voices.
There are so many things that we could be doing for each other that we don't because of assumptions we have and patterns that we have and structures that make it literally hard to help each other.
I don't know. I think for society to recognize people with disabilities in a more conscious way, some of us have to step out of the shadows.
Resiliency is something a lot of the time that is asked of people who shouldn't have been in that situation in the first place.
Because it's not just people with disabilities get put in a box.
But the fact is, the staff here had many different jobs, like multiple jobs, and the provincial government has asked these people to choose a job. So a lot of them have chosen to go to the long-term care facilities that they worked at instead of here. Due to the pay and due to the amount of hours that they receive there, it's easier to live off what they make there.
And so people who are able to make the best of it are held up as leaders and paragons, and this lovely phrase, inspiration porn, for everyone else to get to feel warm and fuzzy because a person with a disability did a thing.
Like I said, it cramps what I can do.
And the training is quite intense, quite extensive. So sometimes they're here for a couple months, sometimes they're here for 6 months, but they're rarely here for a year.
It's easier to label someone than it is to actually see them and acknowledge them as a person.
People just can't afford to live on this job alone.
Many people with disabilities will no longer be content to be separate from society. They have witnessed the outcry from persons without a disability being stuck in their homes because of the pandemic.
It's discouraging. It's also very exhausting. Mentally exhausting because you spent all that time and all that effort training the staff, and it's also physically exhausting. I feel like I'm always starting over. Like it's just a vicious cycle. It's like you train 5 staff and maybe 2 of them will stay.
Is really developing a bond with the person and being reliable, being more than just another person who's paid to be friends with them.
Many people with disabilities are no longer content to live way below the poverty line.
You can address a whole lot of things by going to the roots instead of constantly putting band-aids on everybody who's gotten hurt. So, we need people doing all of those things because there's a lot of people who need band-aids right now. Just being like, oh, no. We're working on what got you hurt, but, deal with the bleeding yourself. You can't do that either.
People that get wheelchairs dropped off to them and they don't like their chairs. And it's like, well, your chair is part of you. Your chair is what you sit in. I mean, you're not your disability, but your chair is your legs. How would you like buying a pair of shoes that don't fit you and you can barely walk in because they hurt your feet every time you take a step? That's what it's like sitting in a wheelchair that's not meant for you.
That's how change happens, is by people saying, I've had enough.
And just people need to realize that some people don't have that voice
Yeah.
to say, hey, I don't like my chair. I got the wrong chair.
So I don't want people to have to be resilient. But my God, the things that people are able to do where they will get themselves up and make meaning and make something happen for themselves because they had to. There's no other option.
And there's a lot of poverty in people with disabilities, especially if you don't live in rent subsidized housing. If you live in
Yeah.
rent subsidized housing, then you have a better chance of surviving on what you get.
Mhm.
Well, I think the first thing people can learn is don't panic.
Why do so many people feel like they can't breathe and they have to have this off? I was like, welcome to your first panic attack, friends. Now do you want to fund some mental health services?
I think as a society, we need to rethink how we see people.
All I ask is that I be treated with the same respect that you want to be treated, and that's the most important thing to me is the ultimate level of respect.
Like, really don't panic and don't rush out and buy up all the toilet paper.
Folks who have never dealt with their body or their mind or both rebelling against something that has to be done are going to be completely at sea because they've never dealt with it before and they don't have resources.
The biggest thing you can learn from me is knowing when to ask for help.
No, I'm not content with how I'm being treated, and I am going to fight for change.
I can think for myself. I have my own opinions. People with disabilities do have feelings about, what their care they receive or friendships they create, other relationships that they create. It's just the level of respect that we're shown is huge to us.
Contentment is something I think you got to learn, but it's also a decision you make day in and day out.
I don't want people to knock what they are able to do. Again, don't compare it. You woke up today and you're planning on still being alive when you go to bed. And that's step one for being resilient.
Sometimes resiliency is just showing up and going on with life. Taking a good sleep and getting on with life, or not contemplating suicide, or feeling sorry for oneself.
Everything else after that is gravy, seriously.
You can still do what you want, but don't make it dangerous for others.
They're fine, but now they're not fine. And if this can be an empathy building lesson, that we all realize how vitally important it is that we work together to take care of our physical and mental health.
Resiliency for me has meant patience and learning to live with ambiguity.
Because we're not all going to have equal power in society. That just doesn't happen.
If we can take 2020 as the year that we start changing those systems so that all of us can struggle less in future, that would be gold.
But we can work towards having something more equitable than we have now.
Really, really want to impress upon people that you could go from normal everyday life that you think of to one that's radically different in 24 hours.
There's a lot of reason to be advocating. There's a lot of things to advocate about.
Celebrating my accomplishments even when no one else seems to notice.
A hope for people in COVID, able-bodied, disabled, limited intellectually or not, keep putting one foot in front of the other. And try to express yourselves. Be who you are. Don't be, resist the labels, resist the pressure to be only what society expects of you. And go do that. Just, go to bed, repeat, do it again. Well, happy day for the people with disabilities. Let's go make some changes.
People without a disability can be connectors. They can be a bridge to services in the community. And again, I say perhaps most importantly, friends and a portal to their social and economical and political situations that are often very different from people living with disabilities.
I can make a difference.